G'day guys, welcome to this video series where we're going to break down everything that you need to know to master each and every detachment in the Chaos Space Marine Codex. We're going to break down the detachment rules in detail, go through what they do, and give each one a rating of 0 to 10. We're going to break down every enhancement available to each detachment. We're going to talk about which ones are worth the points, which ones you're going to want to leave behind, and we're going to give each of them a rating of 0 to 3. We're then going to break down all of the stratagems, some of the amazing power, which ones are worth the command points and which ones are not, and we're going to give each one of those stratagems a rating of 0 to 3 as well. We're then going to talk about which data sheets pair best with the stratagems, enhancements, and detachment abilities to create some truly brutal combos on the tabletop, and we're going to give them a further rating of 0 to 10. Once that's done, we're going to have an overall power rating for the detachment of 0 to 50 based on the above points. This is going to give you a real indication of how powerful this detachment is. Then we're going to include an example list that includes all of the powerful combos that we've talked about earlier. We're going to give some practical examples of how to deploy that list and how to engage with the terrain and your opponent in various mission formats. And finally, we're going to place that detachment on the detachment leaderboard. We're going to give it a tier rating and we're going to place it in contrast to the other detachments to help you decide which detachment you want to field when you're running your Chaos Space Marines. So with that being said, let's get stuck into the video.
Look for the Blood God.
Alrighty guys, in today's video we're going to be talking about the Deceptors. These are your Alpha Legion style, subversive, kind of sneaky Chaos Space Marines, and they've got some really interesting rules to reflect that, so let's just get stuck straight in. So their detachment role is called Masters of Misdirection, and basically at the declare battle formation step, you can select a number of legionaries and cultist mobs units in your army, and until the end of the battle, those units and any characters attached to them gain the Infiltrator's ability. The maximum number of units selected depends on the battle size, as per below, and in most tournaments you're going to be looking at 2,000 points, so you're going to be selecting up to 3 units of cultists and up to 3 units of legionaries to gain the Infiltrator's keyword. Now what that's going to allow you to do is during deployment, you're going to be able to deploy them anywhere on the battlefield, provided they are not within 9 inches of your opponent's deployment zone or within 9 inches of enemy models. Now this is an absolutely monstrous ability, very, very powerful, and I'm a huge fan of this. It's going to allow you to get cultists up in your opponent's face and prevent them from moving out onto objectives. It's going to allow you to get those legionaries with their Chaos Lords into positions where they can threaten turn 1 charges very reliably, and you're going to be able to do some really interesting stuff by infiltrating your units into areas where they can't be targeted in the first turn by your opponent. So it simultaneously provides a massive durability buff and a massive damage potential to your legionaries and your cultists, which, to be fair, cultists, it's not going to give them much in the ways of durability or damage, but it gives them a lot of utility as well in mission control and mission play. Because remember, your cultists at the start of the command phase, sticky any objectives they control. So being able to infiltrate out those cultists onto every objective in no man's land and then sticky them in the first turn is a massive advantage. So we'll get stuck into that. In terms of power level, I think this is one of the most powerful detachment rules that we have available to us. I give this one a 7 out of 10. Let's talk about enhancements though, because there's some very interesting enhancements in this detachment as well. So going straight into it, first one's called Falsehood for 10 points. Chaos Lord model only, excluding Terminator and Jump Pack models. So just the regular Chaos Lord can take this. In the battle formation step, you can set the bearer up in reserves instead of setting them up on the battlefield. If you do, in the reinforcement steps of one of your movement phases, you can select one model that is a friendly legionary or chosen unit that is on the battlefield. That model is destroyed, ignoring any rules, blah, 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 and the bearer is set up as close as possible to where that model was destroyed, and only within engagement range of enemy units if the model was within engagement range of those enemy units already. The bearer is now attached to the unit as a leader. So what this is essentially going to let you do is you put your Chaos Lord in reserves, you move out your chosen, you move out your legionaries, and then during your movement phase, you're going to be able to pick one of those legionary models out and replace it with your Chaos Lord. This is really, really powerful because it basically means you can psych your opponent out. They don't know where that Chaos Lord's going to be. You're sending out units in multiple directions, and then you can basically choose which one of those you want to be the Chaos Lord based on what your opponent does. Really, really powerful. There are some downsides to this. For example, if you're doing it on Chosen, you're sacrificing a Chosen model in order to pull this off, so it's not that fantastic. And it's also worth noting you have to do this in the reinforcement step of one of your movement phases. So you're not doing it in your opponent's turn, reacting to what they're doing. You have to do it in your own turn. I give this enhancement a 2 out of 3. All right, next we have the Cursed Fang. It's a 10-point enhancement. Heretic studies infantry model only. Improve the armor penetration characteristic of the bearer's melee weapons by 1, and the bearer's melee weapons have precision ability. So this is pretty neat. It's going to mean you're doing a little bit more damage than you otherwise would, and also you're not going to have to spend a command point in order to gain precision on your attacks. And also, what you could do is charge this guy in. He has precision built in, and then you can spend a command point on another character to use the heroic challenge to gain precision there as well, which means you're going to be able to get precision in multiple places. You can sequence it so that the first one's precision takes out whatever character it is in the opponent unit that's giving them a buff, and then the other one goes in and does precision on any other characters. There's some really neat stuff you can do with the Cursed Fang. So this is really interesting. That being said, the fact that you could get precision automatically from a strat anyway means that this is something that is situational at best, because in most situations you would be able to do this anyway without having to buy the enhancement, and the fact that you can't put enhancement on epic heroes and things like that means that this is kind of a bit meh, so I'm going to give this a 1 out of 3. Next we have Shroud of Obfuscation, 15 points, Heretic Astartes infantry model only. The bearer has lone operative and stealth, so this is pretty cool. You can, take a jump pack lord, for example. You can put this on him, and basically he's going to be able to be a lone operative with stealth, and he can fly around to doing things. It's pretty nifty. It's worth noting that it's only the bearer that gains those abilities, so if you put him in a unit, he's not going to have it. And if you put it on something big like a Demon Prince or a Lord Discordant or something, chances are that's going to want to be in your opponent's face, so you're not going to benefit much from that lone op. So it's a bit iffy on which model you'd want to put this on, and we'll discuss some of the options later. But yeah, we're going to give this one a 2 out of 3 because Lone Op is one of the most powerful rules in the game, and it's going to allow you to do some really interesting stuff. And then last, Soul Link. Now, Soul Link is one of my favorite enhancements in the game. I think it's really interesting, and there's so many different ways you can play this, so many different really interesting combos that it's going to be a ton of fun. Basically, what this does is you put it on a Heretic Astartes infantry model, and at the start of your command phase, you can select one other Heretic Astartes infantry character model from your army, excluding epic heroes. And until the start of your next command phase, the bearer gains the Psychic keyword, and the bearer's datasheet abilities are replaced with the datasheet abilities of the character you selected. So what this means is you can take, in your army, you might have a Chaos Lord, you might have a Dark Apostle, and you might have a Master of Executions. And the Master of Executions has Soul Link, right? And that basically means when you go in, you can either go, okay, I'm going to keep the reroll hits aura, the ability that the Master of Executions has, or you can go, actually, I'm going to use my Soul Link, and I'm going to take the Chaos Lord's ability to use a free stratagem, and the Chaos Lord's ability to go Super Saiyan with his attacks. Or you might go, or actually, no, I'm going to take the Dark Apostle's +1 to wound, because you might be attacking a certain target that's going to be particularly advantageous for. So it allows you to sort of have one character that instead of just its datasheet abilities, it has all of the datasheet abilities that you have, and then it can select from them, which is wild, especially for only 5 points. This one's a must-have. This is an absolute steal. 3 out of 3. So there are your enhancements. There's some really interesting stuff in there. Let's talk about the stratagems that are available to the Deceptors, because there's some really wild ones in here as well. So the first one we have is called Detonator. There's 1 CP in any phase just after an enemy model with a Deadly Demise ability is destroyed. And basically, one Heretic Astartes character unit from your army that's within 18 inches of that model is the target of the stratagem. And when you do this, your opponent does not need to roll to determine whether they inflict mortal wounds by Deadly Demise. Instead, mortal wounds are automatically inflicted. If that ability has a random number, your opponent rolls to determine the number as normal. So basically, it's a stratagem that says if there's a character within 18 inches of an enemy vehicle when it explodes, it doesn't have to be a vehicle, but they're generally, most Deadly Demise things are vehicles. But if they're within 18 inches of it when it dies, this guy can make it automatically explode, which is fantastic. There's so many armies that cluster, and they generally, one explosion in the middle of their lines can be a massive problem. You're able to send this guy in, then bring out your stuff, shoot something, kill it, then use this to make it automatically explode. If they have a big thing like a Land Raider or Angron, or any kind of big unit that's going to be doing D6, now you're spending 1 CP to do D6 mortal wounds to everybody within range of that vehicle. It's fantastic. It is somewhat limited because you have to have a character within 18 inches, for example, to be able to pull this off, and you still need to kill the thing that you're targeting, and there's not a great deal of damage buffs available in this detachment, so there's some disadvantages to it, but overall, I think this is fantastic. I give this a 2 out of 3. We've got the next one, From All Sides. This is a battle tactic, which means if you have a Chaos Lord, you'll be able to use this for free. At the start of your charge phase, one Heretic Astartes unit from your army. Until the end of the charge phase, add one to the charge rolls made for a unit in your army for each other Heretic Astartes unit from your army that made a charge move this phase, to a maximum of 3+. So basically, you're going to go, like, Legionaries go in, your Cultists go in, and a Rhino charges or something like that. And now that unit of Warp Talons that arrive from Deep Strike, you can spend 1 CP and get +3 to their charge. This is really, really good, and it's going to allow you to play some really interesting stuff with Warp Talons. One of the criticisms of them is that, you're often going to be rapid ingressing, charging something, it dies, then you disappear, and then next turn you rapid ingress again. And you can do that on and on. That only allows you to do 1 unit. Whereas this means that the second unit doesn't require rapid ingress. It can just come in from Deep Strike, go for a +3 inch charge, so need to roll a 6, and then both of them disappear. One of them rapid ingresses back, and then in your next turn it goes charges, the other one drops, +3 to the charge, and then they both cycle out. So it allows you to get extra utility out of your Warp Talons, and it's also just super reliable. There's those times when you're like, it's a 6-inch charge with my Chaos Lord or something like that. You might just spend the 1 CP to make it so it's now a 3, so that you're guaranteed to get that reliability. So really interesting stratagem, this one. This is a 3 out of 3 as far as I'm concerned. Anything that can make charges more reliable is huge in my book. So that's really good. Next we have Picking Them Off. This is a 1 CP stratagem. In your shooting phase, one Heretic Astartes unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot this phase. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes an attack that targets a unit that is below its starting strength, you can reroll the hit roll. And if it's below half strength, you can reroll the wound roll as well. So this is really good. It's similar to the ones that we've seen in other detachments, but it's way better because this one, you just put a little bit of damage into something, and then when you go to shoot it with your next unit, because it's taken a little bit of damage, you get full rerolls to hit into it. That's really fantastic. And also, if you're versing something really big like a Knight, and it takes you a lot to get it through, you can go, cool, I'm going to shoot my Predator first, I'm going to drop it a little bit, then I'm going to shoot my Vindicator, drop it a little bit. Now it's below half strength, and that's when I hit it with something like, that's got a high volume of fire, and I'm going to get reroll hits and wounds on that unit, which is going to really seal the deal and lock in that last bit of damage. So this is really, really good. The challenge to this is obviously that by the time you're using this stratagem, if you're doing it like I just said, you've probably run out of serious shooting stuff, and also the fact that it doesn't help you out in combat at all, and Chaos Space Marines are a pretty combat-heavy army, means that this is not as powerful as it might sound in other armies. So I think this is pretty good. I'm going to give it a 1 out of 3, though, based on those reasons. Next, we have Coils of Deception. This is a 1 CP strategic ploy. In your movement phase, just after Heretic Astartes unit from your army falls back, until the end of the turn, your unit is eligible to shoot in a turn at which fell back. So shooting and falling back is always really good, especially if you've got lots of shooting units and lots of, DACA that you want to be able to just go, cool, they can't just tag you, they have to kill you. So there's a common tactic when you have shooting units that your opponent's going to charge something, kill it, and then they're going to pile into and tag your shooting unit, like your Havocs or something, and now all of a sudden those Havocs do nothing. Well, this prevents that. This allows you to fall back with them and then shoot the thing that just tried to tag them, which gives them a whole new lease of life, and it can effectively translate to getting an additional unit in some situations. And if you take your list around this sort of stratagem and you build in lots of things that are going to get an advantage out of fall back and shoot, this becomes really, really relevant and really, really powerful. So I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 3. Alright, next we have Relentless Pursuit. So this one is a 1 CP strategic ploy in your opponent's movement phase just after an enemy unit ends a normal move, fall back, or advance. One Heretic Astartes unit from your army that they ended within 9 inches of can essentially make a normal move of up to 6 inches. So again, we're seeing these reactive moves pop up in a few of these detachments, and I think they're one of the most powerful abilities in the game. Your ability to go, cool, something's moved near me that's going to charge me and I don't want it to, so I'm going to move away and make that a 6-inch bigger charge, means your opponent's going to really struggle to get the charges that they want. Or if your opponent goes toe-in on an objective in order to try to take it off of you, you can reactively move and put more objective control on that than they have. You can do interesting things like if they're going to move and try to charge one thing, you can reactively move another thing in the way and block them, which is really interesting. There's tons of really, really cool stuff you can do with reactive moves. So I'm a huge fan of this, 3 out of 3 there. And the last one we have is called Scrambled Coordinates. 1 CP, start of the reinforcement step of your opponent's movement phase. 1 Heretic studies unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, enemy units that are set up on the battlefield from reserves cannot be set up within 12 inches horizontally of that unit. So this is pretty wild. Being able to go, cool, I got this one big unit of cultists that's strung out across my backfield, and everywhere within 12 inches of that is inaccessible, is fantastic. It means that they can't drop in behind you, or if you put it in front of your army, they can't drop in behind you because you've got all your other things dotted around screening them out, and if they try to drop in front of you and then charge you, they can't, because they can't drop within 12, and that makes it a not possible charge. So this is really powerful. It's worth noting that you can't use this to prevent your opponent from using rapid ingress, because this has to be used at the start of the reinforcement step of your opponent's turn, whereas if in your turn, they can rapid ingress, no worries. So there is ways to get around this, however, it does provide a lot of utility. So I'm going to give this one a 2 out of 3 as well. So that's your stratagems. There's some real spicy ones in there. I'm a huge fan of those. Let's talk combos. Alright, the next one that's really interesting that we discussed earlier as well was the double Talon, which is the one where you have 2 units of Warp Talons, one of them utilizing rapid ingress, and then the other one utilizing the additional 3 inches from the deep strike. And this really works because Warp Talons have a rule that says at the end of the fight phase, if this unit was eligible to fight this phase and is not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units, you can remove it from the battlefield and place it in strategic reserves. So that's going to allow you to have your 2 units of Warp Talons, one of them charges, kills something, buggers off, goes into deep strike, then next turn it rapid ingresses in your opponent's turn, then in your turn the other one deep strikes, and then you go in, do the same thing, cycle back. Really, really powerful. Alright, the next combo is one that works really well on your humble cultist mob. So in this, I recommend taking units of 20, and what you can do is you can actually use your Infiltrator's ability to deploy these real close to your opponent's deployment zone, so 9 inches away, and then in their first turn, when they go to move, you can reactively move, and then get yourself real close to them, because if they're essentially 9 inches away, if they try to move 1 inch out of their deployment zone, that's going to be able to trigger your reactive move. And the first unit to do so, you're then going to be able to move your cultists in such a way to block the movement of all the rest of their army, which is going to mean that there's a really good chance that they're going to have to spend, even if they go first, they're going to have to spend their entire first turn stuck inside their deployment zone trying to deal with 20 cultists that are blocking them. Yes, those cultists are going to die very easily, but you've just spent 100 points to block them in their deployment zone for an entire turn. That's absolutely bank. I'll pay that any day. Alright, so with all of these considered, I'm going to give the Detachment a 6 out of 10 for combos. There's not that many powerful damage-dealing combos in here. There's a lot of tricky ones, but there's nothing that's really going to dial the damage output or the durability of this army up to any crazy levels. So there's not that much there. However, Chaos Space Marines already have a pretty high damage output, so I think it's pretty good, it's solid, but there's nothing specific to this detachment that make it that much better than any other detachment. So a straight 6 out of 10 for this one, which gives them a total of 34 out of 50, which is a solid result. It's very, very strong. Alright, now let's have a look at a list that I've written that is going to work for the Deceptors. Now it's worth noting, like I've said in the other ones, is that this is designed to match the theme of the army with some competitive play. If you wanted to, you could dial this up and make it a little bit more competitive by taking more meta units, or you could dial this up and make it a little bit more thematic. I'm trying to go for a balance here so that everybody can use this as a sort of start-off point. When you're looking into the detachment, you can start off here, and then you can sort of modify your playstyle to suit, the type of 40k that you enjoy. But let's get stuck into it. So we've got a Chaos Lord with falsehood, we've got a Dark Apostle, and we've got a Master of Executions with the Soul Link. We've then got 1, 2, 3 big units of 20 cultists, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 big units of 10 legionaries. So all of that we've said so far, all of that is going to be able to infiltrate. Nothing has to start in your deployment zone out of what we've just listed there, which is phenomenal. We'll talk about some best places to put these when we pull out some practical examples in a moment, but yeah, you got 30 legionaries and 60 cultists with characters throughout. Then with our other data sheets, we've got 2 Predator Destructors with las cannons. These are very, very reliable units. They're very cheap, they're very strong, they're sort of tough, they do decent damage, very, very cool. Then we've got 3 units of 5 Raptors. Now the idea here is that we're going for something where you've got all your Legionaries and your cultists pushing up, and then you want small units of Raptors that are able to jump around, do your objectives, screen out your opponents so they can't get in behind that front wall that you've just pushed forward. And then we wrap that out with 2 units of Warp Talons so that we can do that double Talon trick. So that's the army list that we're talking about here. So 2 Warp Talons, 3 by Raptors, 3 Cultists, 3 Legionaries, 2 Predators, and a bunch of characters. Really, really strong list. I think this is going to do really, really well. I think you'll see variants of this in tournaments doing quite well. Alright, one of the first things you're going to want to do on a WTC map like this when deploying this army is deploy your unit of cultists that it has infiltrate first, because that's going to prevent your opponent from deploying their infiltrators, and it's also going to allow you to box in your opponent. It's also the first very obvious deployment you're going to do, which is going to allow you to reactively deploy your other stuff more effectively. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to basically take a unit of cultists and string them out all the way along here where this red dot's going, up to here, then in a U shape like this so that you're 9 inches away from your opponent's deployment zone all the way around to here, and then you're going to want to go all the way down past here as well. And that way, or it's down here sort of, and that way basically you can probably do this with 1 unit, but we do have 3 and it's okay to use 2 of them to pull this off. But the goal essentially is to make it so that your opponent can't really leave their deployment zone, and you have cultists on all 3 central objectives. Because that way, if you get that first turn, you're going to sticky all 3 of those objectives, and you can then push in on your opponent. That's a really, really powerful way to start. Then, with your second 2 units, you're going to want to reinforce 2 sides. You're going to want to put 1 unit over here, and 1 unit down here. And that way, if you're in your first turn, if you get the first turn, you're going to be able to move them all in, and advance them all in, and you're going to be able to have cultists pretty much stringing like this. Really, really close to your opponent. And then basically, if they don't have the fly keyword, they are not leaving their deployment zone for 1 to 2 turns. They're basically just going to have to spend the whole time stuck in their deployment zone, which is an absolute game breaker for a lot of armies. And if they do have fly, that's okay. They're going to be able to dip out, but it's still going to be hard for them because you have so many models. You're going to be able to spread them out. So instead of being in a single file line, you basically have the 1 unit in a single file line like that, and then just behind them, you have all these models dotted all over the place, so that basically, even though they do have fly, they're not going to be able to fly out and charge something that's on this objective because they won't be able to physically place their models because you've filled all the space with cultists, which means they're going to have to spend that first turn charging the things that are right in front of them and dealing with them. So that's a really effective way to start the game. Then you basically want to start deploying your other things like your predators in your backfield to hold your home, and that sort of thing. It's also worth noting it's pretty powerful to have 1 unit of cultists deployed in your backfield. So if you have the 3 and they have no infiltrators themselves, and etc., having 1 unit that strings out in your backfield along these lines is also really good because you can use that scrambled coordinates to prevent your opponent from dropping in your backfield, and they can't drop within 12 instead of 9. So you can measure 12 inches from the corner here, place a model, and then you basically put a couple models in on a diagonal like that, and then measure 12 inches from that wall and run a line of cultists along, and 12 inches from that table edge and run a cultist line 12 along. And that way your opponent can't drop behind you, which means they have to engage you in the middle. And that's where you want them to be. You want them engaging you over those middle objectives, not sneaking in behind you. You're sneaking in behind them with your warp talons. So that's really a really effective way of deploying your cultists. And then basically once you've done that, you want to keep your legionary units that are infiltrating to deploy last, so that you can wait, see where your opponent deploys their things, and then deploy in response to that. A few really good spots are things like up in this ruin up the top here. That's a pretty good place to infiltrate 10 legionaries, because it means that you're going to have really strong command over this central objective here, and also if your opponent does put things out here and you decide that you want to go for it, you can on the first turn just move out and then launch in for a charge there. So another good spot to put them is down on this objective down here, similar reason. So normally if you put something down here, you'd be potentially vulnerable to if they had a tank here or something like that. They could move out and then shoot you. However, remember, we've got a line of cultists there. So that tank isn't going to be able to move out to get line of sight on those legionaries because there's cultists in the way. So the combination there is really, really powerful. So you make sure that your cultists are blocking their movement so that you can place your models on those midfield objectives. And then the last one, of course, is going to be somewhere central so that you can respond somewhere in a ruin like this one here. And that way you've got your 3 central ruins. You've got these big units of legionaries with beatstick characters in them that are unable to be targeted by your enemy shooting and are unable to be charged because there's lines of cultists in the way. So real strong position early game. And the idea here is you're going to have a couple of really strong turns. Your opponent's going to chew through all those cultists, but you're able to dictate when the fight happens with the legionaries. And basically you want to use those 3 legionaries and the 2 warp talon units, so you've got 5 combat bricks, to basically blow up their combat bricks, and then they're going to really struggle to capture those objectives back off you. And because your cultists sticky them in that first battle round, you're going to control them even if you've got no models on them. So that's a really effective way of securing really strong primary. As for your tank deployment, you've got 2 predators in the list, and there's actually a lot of freedom in where you deploy these guys compared to most other armies. Most other armies are going to be hiding their predators in behind the walls so that they can't be targeted on that first turn. However, because we know that we've blocked our opponent in, we don't necessarily have to deploy like here where it's hidden. We could get away with deploying somewhere like this, because typically you wouldn't deploy here, because if you deploy there, yes, your opponent can't see you from their deployment zone, but if they get the first turn, they can move up into the center there and then shoot you, right? But, or they, if they deploy on the corner there, they're going to be able to turn 1 charge you. However, we know that because of our cultists and because of our legionaries, they're not going to be able to charge us or shoot us if we're there in the first turn, because they're not going to be able to come out of their deployment zone. So it really does not only unlock a lot of deployment space for your legionaries and your cultists, but it actually unlocks a lot for your predator as well. If you were playing on one of the GW train layouts, there's some very similar theories here. So in terms of where you place your cultists, it's going to be almost identical regardless of the train, because you're deploying your cultists in such a way that you're not too concerned about them dying. You're mainly deploying them there based on your opponent's deployment zone in order to block them in. Whereas the legionaries, that's a slightly different story. Your legionaries, you are deploying them to be somewhere safe so that your opponent can't see them from their deployment zone. You know they can't leave their deployment zone, but you don't want to just lose them turn 1 because you deploy them out in the open. So on a GW map like this one here, you're going to want to deploy legionaries inside this ruin here so they can't be seen, and then basically either inside this ruin here or behind this ruin here if you can, depending on the the specifics of wherever the actual train pieces are. There's also plenty of room inside here and inside here that you can deploy them. So there's plenty of safe spots that you can put your legionaries where they are threatening those midfield objectives. And like I said, because your cultists are stickying those objectives, you don't necessarily have to deploy on them. Because if you deploy 1 unit of cultists, screens them out, then the other 2 are touching the objectives. So in their first turn, they kill the front unit because it's all they really can hit. Then it goes over into your turn, you sticky those objectives, and then you send those cultist units in. So now the cultists are screening them, blocking them in their deployment zone for another turn, and your legionaries don't actually have to be on the objective now. And then in your opponent's turn, they kill those 2 units of legionaries, so now it's their turn 3, and they haven't even left their deployment zone yet. And then in your command phase, even though you've got nothing on the objectives, you get those victory points. You don't even have to come out of your hole in turn 3. You just stay there. And then in your turn 4, your opponent's going to have to send something out onto that objective to stop you from controlling it. And when they do so, you're then able to pounce on them in your turn 4 with your legionaries. So even though this army doesn't have amazing durability in the fact that it doesn't have access to Feel No Pains or neg1 damage or any of that sort of stuff, it does have amazing durability in the fact that it's able to prevent your opponent from leaving their deployment zone, which keeps all of your units alive. And also, the fact that you're leaning harder on the cultists who have that sticky objective also goes a long way towards making it so that you don't have to have units out on objectives that are exposed to enemy shooting or within charge range of enemy combat. You can just go, cool, now that I've sticky that objective, everything else is going to stay safe. And that massively improves the durability of the models in your army. Alrighty, so with all of that said, where do we put the Deceptors on the detachment leaderboard? I think, personally, of my opinion, they belong right about here, in between the Veterans of the Long War and the Pack-Bound Zealots. They are an amazing, fun, thematic, and powerful army. 34 points, so it gets them just above Pack-Bound Zealots, but just below the Veterans of the Long War score of 37, but they are still a solid A-tier army. Alrighty, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Head over to blogforthebloodgod.com and you can check out ways to support the channel there. You can pick up shirts like this. We've got neoprene objective markers, we've got dice, we've got gaming aids, we've got terrain, we've got all kinds of really cool stuff over there on blogforthebloodgod.com. And you can also join our Patreon and our Discord community. Absolutely fantastic group of guys over there. And I hope to talk to you guys soon in the comments section below. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.